The Sega Dreamcast was a pioneer for online gaming on consoles. Though online play was possible on the likes of the Saturn and even the Mega Drive before it, the Dreamcast came with a modem and browser disk right out of the box, even going so far as to offer free internet service to incentivize adoption and use of this feature. Rather than being a strange, caveat-riddled curio you had to buy esoteric and expensive add-ons for, like in the past, online gaming was a standard feature, changing the console space forever. The lineup of online games was no slouch either, boasting the likes of Phantasy Star Online, Quake 3 Arena, and, lest we forget, the flawlessly named Street Fighter II X for matching service. Before too long, the Sakura Wars franchise would also take a bold step onto the information superhighway with its first online multiplayer title, Hanagumi Taisen Columns 2. Okay, but after that, it got a full, dedicated online-only game. Though not in the form you'd probably initially assume. This will require a fair amount of preamble, so bear with me for a moment. Back in September 1999, Overworks dropped Atsumare Guru Onsen for the Dreamcast on store shelves. Guru Onsen was framed as an online hot springs resort, where you could meet with other players, relax, chat, dabble in board games, and participate in community events. Though this might not sound terribly exciting in the current year, these kinds of games were very much in style at the time, and this too proved to be a hit, launching at number 2 in the Dreamcast sales charts and staying in the weekly top 10 for over 2 months, selling 40,589 copies before dropping off. This success would beget a sequel, Guru Onsen 2, in August 2001, which added a feature that would prove to be groundbreaking for its era. That's right, they added Uno. Furthermore, it introduced Sega's Open Dice service, a platform that would allow supported games to communicate regardless of console. Some of you might already be familiar with how the aforementioned Quake 3 Arena could crossplay with PC players. What Open Dice was doing, though, was something more ambitious. It didn't just enable crossplay between Guru Onsen 2 and its eventual PC port, but between different games as well. Players from one game could visit and interact with players in another, bridging what would otherwise be 2 separate online communities. The Open Dice service was framed as a theme park, where each individual game was likened to a different area or land within the park, and the framework allowed more games to be added in the future. The first of these additions was none other than Sakura Wars Online, released on December 20th, 2001 in 2 versions. One focused on the Tokyo cast, named Long Days in the Imperial Capital, and the other focusing on the Paris cast, titled Elegant Days in Paris. It would be reasonable to assume an online Sakura Wars game would be some kind of MMO where you're the member of either of the 2 combat reviews, taking missions to combat the demonic hordes while raising your trust with the established cast members. And you would be completely and utterly wrong. The game we ended up getting was basically a Sakura Wars version of Guru Onsen 2, hence the interconnectivity between those games via Open Dice, to the point where you could even play with the same character across both. That being said, it wasn't just a quick and dirty reskin. For one, Sakura Wars Online launched with a severe lack of Uno.
You have Uno, you fucking dick!
I don't have it, you fucking
That grievous misstep aside, Sakura Wars Online also differentiated itself by allowing you to hang out with the series cast, visit numerous locations in its world, make big choices via the series' trademark lips prompts, accept missions from familiar commanders, and collect Bromides, all as you interacted with fellow Sakura Wars fans and Open Dice users in shared spaces to chat and play in. This game has always been something of an enigma to Western fans of the series, and it's easy to see why. By virtue of being a Japan-only online game that, as of this recording, has been dark for nearly 20 years, extremely little footage of its main online mode remains on the wider internet. The majority of gameplay you'll find on YouTube, Nico Nico, and the like is of its offline modes, where you can play all the table games against the CPU. On top of that, in all my searches, I haven't been able to find any TV ads, promotional footage, trailers, demos, anything at all. the promotion for this game was seemingly done exclusively via articles in gaming magazines and fan club newsletters. As such, this video's gonna be a little different. Less my usual retrospective and review, and more a full-on archaeological dig, scrounging together strategy guides, news articles, archived posts from the official Open Dice BBS, and whatever other scraps I can find in order to make a clearer picture of what this game once was. Like many online games of its era, accessing the service didn't come free. However, while most of those games required a bespoke subscription fee on a per-game basis, Open Dice games were all covered by one singular subscription, which came in packages of either 500 dorimu per month or 1350 dorimu per 3 months. If players had Sega's Isao.net service as their dedicated ISP, a package including unlimited internet access and an Open Dice subscription was also available for 2,200 yen per month. Though this service has been dead for decades, you can still enter the online portion of the game and progress a certain amount before it forces its first server check on you, so let's walk through that real quick. First, you start by registering your name, birth date, and gender before proceeding to the Open Dice user registration form. And since the service has long since been dead, it doesn't really matter what you put here right now. After that, the game attempts to connect to the server, and since this was during the dial-up days and connecting to a network could take a while, you're presented with a puzzle minigame while you wait. Even if this first check fails, you can proceed to character creation, where you're presented with a surprising variety of options. Some parts have to be unlocked through play, with some available to unlock both offline or online, while others were made available to unlock only during limited time events. Once you've put the finishing touches on your little homunculus, it's time to enter the game itself, into the main hub, dubbed Sakura Town. The map is split right down the middle by a river, with Tokyo on one side, Paris on the other, and a few islands in the middle. A bus drops you off at the island at the top, the Dormitory, your home in Sakura Town. Once you step inside your own personal room, you get a call on the Kinematron, from either Yoneda or Grand-Mère, again depending on your version of choice. To help you settle in, they offer you the services of one of the members of the review they oversee to help give you a tour of the town. That is to say, Tokyo version players could pick one of the Imperial Combat Review members, and Paris players could pick one of the Paris Combat Review members to start with. Once you pick a girl and chat with her for a bit, it's time to head outside and go on your grand tour. Or rather, that's what would happen if you weren't blocked by a for-real server check this time. Yeah, sadly, this is as far as you can go nowadays. For everything past this point, I have no choice but to rely on secondhand sources, so bear with me as I piece all this together. Assuming you actually got past the online check, you'd find yourself in Sakura Town proper, online and ready to mingle with fellow Sakura Wars fans. No matter where you went in Sakura Town, you'd find a status bar at the top of the screen, telling you how long you'd been online and showing you a scrolling text newsfeed. The feed would highlight in-game events by default, but could be switched over to various other teletext broadcast channels, the lineup of which was frequently changing. Examples included a channel for gaming news from GameSpot Japan, a channel listing popularity rankings for songs in Sega's karaoke service, and a channel detailing the hottest new ringtones you could buy for your phone. Yes, this is a thing people actually cared about at the time. Sakura Town itself, meanwhile, was an exaggerated amalgamation of both Tokyo and Paris, dotted with famous landmarks from both the series and real life. Though this map was largely static and wouldn't see any significant updates throughout the game's life, its appearance would change based on the current season. Each landmark in Sakura Town housed different features of the game. First was the Dormitory, which, besides being the location of your own private room, was your main hub for chatting with other users. Chat rooms could be made either open to strangers or private, and could fit 4 people at a time, with their avatars inhabiting the physical space, with multiple layouts to choose from, such as the theater's command center or the cafe near Ogami's apartment in Montmartre. The player avatars would emote appropriately based on keywords uttered in chat, and the room layouts had associated gimmicks triggered in a similar fashion.
I just don't know.
This is also where you could engage with Open Dice's crossplay functionality and enter special chat rooms with Guru Onsen 2 and 3 players. Icons near the player names indicated which game that player was chatting from. The capital S with either a Sakura petal or feathery wing indicated Sakura Wars Online, while a swirly onsen symbol with a number indicated Guru Onsen. Within these communal chat spaces, players could also use party goods, which were gadgets and conversation starters meant to keep chats going if they ever stalled out, such as randomly selected conversation topics, dice, or roulette wheels with the players' names. You could also invite other players to your own room to chat in, letting you show off how you customized its appearance, a topic we'll get into more a bit later. Besides these chat rooms, the dormitories also housed the feature known as talk shows. Talk shows were pre-scheduled 30 to 60-minute chat sessions with special guests, covering a variety of subjects, sometimes with time extensions available and often with attendance caps varying between 800 to 1,500 people. The guests would chat with each other on stage in a talk show format, like the name suggests, while the audience could react and chat amongst themselves. Not unlike the chats you see on live streams nowadays, though maybe with fewer requests to show feet. Talk shows were often used by the Sakura Wars development staff to give progress updates on upcoming games or have post-mortem chats on shipped games, with Sakura Wars series director Takaharu Terada being a relatively frequent guest. Finally, the dormitories also hosted profile card exchange events. Exchanging profile cards is how users could befriend each other, allowing them to view each other's online status and send messages and invites. Profile cards feature not only the user's name and avatar, but also their favorite hobby, favorite character, dream for the future, their play records, and even their email address if they so chose. Users could exchange profile cards whenever, including in real life by slotting two VMUs together and using the required VMU app, and as many times as you'd like, with your friendship ranking increasing the more times you exchanged profile cards. However, the exchange events at the dormitories were special. Users would enter random chat sessions in designated lobbies in the hopes of getting to exchange profile cards with the actual series characters, with each event usually having 2 characters to find at a time. As such, it wasn't a guarantee that you'd get to meet those characters, making their profile cards valued collectibles that users could brag about having. Next up were the famous landmarks of each respective represented city, which you could access regardless of which version you were playing. What these landmarks did is house one of the available table games for you to play online with other people. In Tokyo, Asakusa housed Koi Koi, the Hanafuda card game as seen in Sakura Wars 1 and the Teigeki Graph fan disc, and Ueno housed Mahjong. On the Paris side, the Eiffel Tower housed Poker and L'Arc de Triomphe housed President. Upon entering each location, you were greeted by that facility's guide, who acted as a personification of the matchmaking functionality, helping you find rooms or enter any ongoing tournaments. Tournaments would often be held for special promotions, such as the release of games like Shinobi, Skies of Arcadia Legends, and Sakura Wars Stories Mysterious Paris, or collaborations with real-world businesses such as Lotte. These tournaments were no joke either, as beyond the prizes you might expect, such as in-game money and items, high-ranking players could even net real-world prizes. For example, a tournament held to promote the Hatoya Resort and Hotel featured prizes such as free merchandise and even free lodgings at the hotel. Regardless of your placement, competing in tournaments would also fill out a stamp card with special in-game items as your prize for filling it out, encouraging participation from even less skilled players and further ensuring a sizable amount of entrants. Some games would naturally be less popular than others, so in order to combat this, Open Dice encouraged the creation of guilds that would help like-minded players organize play sessions for their games of choice, which Open Dice would then promote on the official website's Guild Play section. Next, the Grand Imperial Theatre and Les Chats Noirs, both of which were accessible regardless of version and offered the same functionality, primarily being missions. Visiting either Yoneda at the theater or Grand-Mère at Les Chats Noirs would allow you to accept missions, with each commander having their own separate list of missions, divided up into tiers. Early tiers were simple, such as exchange a profile card or play 10 rounds of poker in a row, win or lose. Meanwhile, the final tiers were significantly trickier, such as place in the upper 10th percentile in a tournament, or get over 40 points in a 10-round game of Koi Koi. Of particular note was the mission to exchange 10 profile cards in real life using the VMU link. So if you didn't already have an extensive IRL friend group of Sakura Wars Online players, then yeah, good luck with that one. Within the Grand Imperial Theatre, you could also visit Tsubaki at the gift shop, where you could buy all manner of items. The in-game currency, called Oran, could be obtained via the aforementioned missions and tournaments, and every user was also given a monthly allowance of 30,000 Oran, and Tsubaki's shop was the only place to spend it all. Typical of online games even now, inventory rotated on a daily basis, in this case determined by what day of the month it was, and discounts were offered during special in-game events. You could get decorations for your room, such as dolls, model kits, or posters featuring major series characters, heroes and villains alike. If you ever wanted to show the world just how much of a fan of Calamari you were, your big chance had arrived. You could even buy alternate wallpapers, ceilings, and floorings in case you were growing bored of your room's default aesthetic. And of course, it wouldn't be Sakura Wars if you couldn't also buy Bromides. Bromide collection was a major feature in Sakura Wars Online, and bromide trading was highly incentivized between players, with the end goal of completing a full collection. The game featured a total of 167 bromides, with players of the Tokyo version having a higher likelihood of finding bromides of Sakura Wars 1 and 2 characters in the shop, while Paris version players would have found Sakura Wars 3 characters more often instead. Bromides ran the gamut of the main heroines, villains, and even bit supporting characters. Yes, you could even get one of the CEO of racism himself. Though most of these bromides were made out of previously seen art assets, there were a few rarities thrown into the mix, such as a bromide of Kanna's father, which to this day remains the only time you could ever see his face in any of the games. So now that we've gone over all the main facilities within Sakura Town, that leaves us with a big question. Where are the girls? And how do they fit into all of this? Like, we asked one to give us a tour of the town before the server check thwarted us, but what would that have actually entailed? And what about all the other girls you didn't pick? Well, simply put, the girls act as your partners when you hit the town. Whenever you were about to leave your room, you could call one up on the Kinematron, ask them to hang out, and they'd meet you at the fountain at the center of town. From then on, they'd tag along for your entire excursion until you went back home. The girl you picked to give you a tour at the beginning was essentially a freebie unlock, adding her to your Kinematron's contact list. For the rest of the partner roster, you had to unlock them one by meeting specific criteria. In fact, you could unlock even more characters as partners beyond the main Flower Division girls by meeting the right conditions. Yuri, Kasumi, Tsubaki, Mel, C, and Kaede could also be befriended, and that's not all. It wasn't just the girls you could pal around with, but a handful of boys were available as well. That's right, you could also partner up with the likes of Ogami and Kayama. What's more, the partner pool wasn't just limited to heroes, as you could even befriend major series villains like Tenkai, Onio, and Saru, among others. Partner characters served a variety of gameplay functions. They'd tag along as you play the table games, where they would quip and banter based on how the games were progressing, as well as allow you to use their super moves in this game's special mode of Mahjong. Depending on your performance in these games, your trust level would change accordingly. After all, what kind of Sakura Wars game would this be without the trust mechanic? And just like any Sakura Wars game worth its salt, you also had the occasional lips prompt, with your answers again impacting your trust with that character. Partners could also give you mini-missions as you spent the day with them, which would give additional trust boosts upon completion. At high enough trust levels, partners would sometimes invite you out instead, usually on special occasions like your birthday, and upon maxing out their trust levels, would give you new avatar parts and unique items. Perhaps the single most important function partner characters served in the game was triggering events. Events could not occur when traveling Sakura Town solo, but with a partner along, you could bump into familiar faces and converse with them. These events would often affect your trust levels with either your partner or the character you ran into, and some would even unlock avatar parts. Some events would only occur with specific combinations of partner characters and avatar parts, such as when wearing matching outfits. If the transcript I found on this old walkthrough site is to be believed, then holy shit, Kayama, there is no straight explanation for this. Additionally, some of the events had full-screen CGs, namely special seasonal events, viewable only during specific time ranges throughout the year. You had your standard holidays like Christmas, Easter, and New Year's, as well as regional celebrations like cherry blossom viewing with the Tokyo team, or a waiters race with the Paris squad, along with some more generally season-themed scenes. Also, I might as well bring this up now, as this is something I've largely glossed over in my other videos, but In many of the other Sakura Wars games, you could stumble upon events where you'd find one of the girls using the baths or showers. You have the option to give in to your base desires and sneak a peek at them, but this almost always ends with you getting caught and suffering a huge drop in trust. And honestly, given how the games have all ages ratings in Japan, you're never gonna see much anyway. These are never mandatory, and you can go through most of the games without ever seeing the option even once, so if that sort of thing rubs you the wrong way, or you just rather not for any reason, thankfully you don't have to engage. I bring this all up because, as I'm sure you could guess, Sakura Wars Online had these types of events as well. The way they were depicted in this game was less than ideal too, as they were almost always instigated by Ogami. While the games left whether or not Ogami is a total pervert to player choice, and canonical Sakura Wars media such as the OVAs avoided painting him in such a light, this characterization of Ogami is not uncommon as the default in spin-offs like this or in crossovers. Additionally, there were often unique avatar part rewards locked behind the bathroom events in Sakura Wars Online, adding a material incentive to invading the girl's privacy. However, much like how the game let you hang out and gain trust with the boys, it also let you put that shower sandal right on the other foot and give Ogami a taste of his own medicine. Kayama, for one, seems to enjoy the show, and for his part, doesn't seem to actually mind being on the receiving end himself either. I guess when it comes to being a peeping Tom, Sakura Wars Online was truly the great equalizer. With the amount of Sakura Wars characters, tropes, and mechanics integrated into the experience, this seemed like the perfect social space for fans of the series. However, the launch of Sakura Wars Online would prove to be a bumpy one. The official Open Dice BBS was filled with complaints about typical launch period problems, such as connection issues, long load times, and matchmaking errors. But by far, the biggest problem came in the form of a crippling Day 1 bug that left a large swath of players unable to exchange profile cards. In other words, players affected by this bug were left unable to add friends to their friend list. A devastating problem for an online game. Not only that, but as previously mentioned, several in-game missions and events relied heavily on the profile card trading function. The bug was triggered by either playing with a character transferred over from Guru Onsen 1 to the Open Dice service, or attempting to trade profile cards with a player who had done this character transfer themselves. Games on Dreamcast couldn't be patched to fix bugs either, so the solution Sega had to implement was a disc exchange program. Affected players who applied for the program would be shipped a fixed version of the disc, and would have to personally hand over the original disc to the delivery person at the point of receipt. Though this error was caught and addressed during launch, newcomers to the game who happened to buy a used or unfixed copy would continue to be plagued by it throughout the game's entire life, and the stigma caused by it haunted the game all the while. Though it's difficult to say how much news of this bug harmed adoption of the game, all the same, we can safely say that the launch of Sakura Wars Online was, well, subdued, as sales data about the game is practically non-existent. Even Sakura Wars GB2, with its piddly Week 1 sales numbers, apparently made a bigger splash. The only concrete verifiable figures we have to use as a basis are for the game it was molded after, Guru Onsen 2, which sold only 17,343 copies before it fell off the weekly charts, a mere fraction of what its predecessor managed. It should be noted that promotion was extremely limited, not just for Sakura Wars Online, but for all of Open Dice's titles, a fact the Open Dice BBS posters love to bring up time and time again. Beyond that, we only have anecdotal evidence and hearsay posted on the BBS to go off of. One user reported seeing only a combined total of 1,600 players across the entire Open Dice service on Sakura Wars Online's launch day, expressing surprise that a series as popular as Sakura Wars was at the time didn't seem to be drawing in the crowds. In a post made a few years later, another user claimed that the price of the first print special editions of the game had drastically plummeted to less than 2,000 yen a mere 3 months after launch, all while implying its sales were impacted by the reputation of its infamous Day 1 bug. All that being said, while adoption of the game may have been slow, it nonetheless developed a stable and lively community right from the outset, The BBS was packed with amusing anecdotes, idle small talk, questions on how to find the secret partner characters, rumors about hidden game modes, and other miscellaneous topics. Several users reported that the Reni profile card exchange event, hosted mere days after the game's launch to coincide with her canonical birthday, saw the lobbies filled to capacity. In the months following launch, tournaments experienced high attendance and healthy support, being held at an average cadence of twice a month, and all of them featuring real-world prizes such as copies of Sakura Wars 4's limited edition or tickets to the Hanayashiki amusement park in Tokyo. Talk shows also hit the ground running, with an average of one talk show per month featuring guests from Famitsu, Dorimaga, and the Sakura Wars series development staff. Series creator Oji Hiroi also dropped in on the game on occasion, such as during a mahjong tournament held in honor of his birthday from February 8th to the 12th, 2002, and taking part in a talk show about the development of Sakura Wars 4 on March 8th, 2002. These were rare opportunities to get to interact with a prominent figure in the gaming industry, years before the rise of social media would make such things commonplace. With this level of strong support and the game being full of secrets that would only reveal themselves as the weeks and months passed, it was an exciting time for players. Though not without bumps along the way, it seemed to be the ideal Sakura Wars community experience as advertised. However, all things must pass, and indeed, this level of enthusiasm would ultimately prove to be fleeting, among both the player base and the administration. As time went on, players would naturally fall off of the game. With such a limited player count in the first place, though, each lapsed player had a pronounced impact on the game's overall health. By the time of the game's first anniversary on December 21st, 2002, the player base had already fallen off by more than half, and would only continue to decline as the years went on. 2004 in particular seemed to be the major turning point for the game's fortunes. The service went from small but impassioned to neglected and desolate. Several posts on the BBS, this one dated February 13th, 2004, reported that games on the Open Dice service were all but deserted during the daytime, with most players choosing to play closer to midnight due to cheap late-night dial-up plans from some of Japan's major ISPs at the time. Even then, one post from February 3rd, 2004, reported a peak concurrent user count of just 226 within Sakura Wars Online alone. This post detailed the sordid state of the game, with most players flocking to Supermove Mahjong, while lobbies for most other games, normal Mahjong included, remained empty whenever there wasn't either an ongoing tournament or a scheduled guild session. Around the same time, the teletext news channels started falling into disuse. One BBS thread from mid-2004 details how the karaoke rankings and ringtone news channels hadn't updated since 2003, how many other channels were slow to update, and how GG Press's dedicated channel had regressed to merely spitting out horoscopes. Talk shows also began to lose steam as time went on, with 2003 seeing only 3 shows held throughout the entire year, and 2004 seeing only one single talk show. The tournaments, to their credit, kept offering physical prizes even as player counts fell, though with fewer and fewer tournament sponsors as time went on, the prizes weren't nearly as attractive as those from the early days. Participants could still win copies of the newest Sakura Wars games, copies of other games from Overworks' back catalog, or miscellaneous merchandise bundles, but gone were the days of hotel packages and theme park tickets. It's worth mentioning that, in October of 2003, Overworks was merged with WoW Entertainment to become Sega WoW, which in turn completely dissolved in July 2004. Though there's no concrete evidence to support this, it's easy to speculate that this repeated shakeup in structure was the cause of Open Dice's support evaporating within that same time frame, alongside the generally dwindling player numbers. The remaining players, for their part, were vocal about their ideas to revitalize the game. Some suggested Sega port the game to PS2 to give it a second wind, or perhaps a full-blown sequel tailor-made for the system. Others suggested Sega make Open Dice truly open by integrating it with their other games such as Phantasy Star Online, or even allowing third-party developers to make games using the Open Dice framework. Some even made the bold assertion that maybe Sega should try actually advertising and promoting their Open Dice games. All of these pleas seemingly fell on deaf ears. The game would persist in this state of decline for another year until eventually, on August 24th, 2005, the day everyone had dreaded, yet expected, finally came. OpenDICE formally announced that the service would be shutting down in 3 months' time on November 30th at 9 a.m. Japan time. The existing archive of the BBS is spotty at this point, but the reactions we can still see were marked by disappointment regarding all of the game's narrative content vanishing into the ether, and complaints that there was no end-of-service subscription discount. No posts remain from the game's final moments. Thankfully, though, we do have footage taken from within the mixed chat of Guru Onsen of the OpenDICE service's final minutes, showing players from the Guru Onsen series and both versions of Sakura Wars Online sharing one last moment together before the games were taken offline for good. Among the flurry of chat bubbles, you could see messages of gratitude, thanking the staff and saying how happy they were to have played the game throughout the years. Messages from users pledging to reunite in whatever online game Sega would cook up next. And of course, messages from the Sakura Wars Online players telling everyone to strike a victory pose. Eventually, the clock struck 9, and the servers finally went offline, never to return. After a little over 4 years of service, OpenDICE was no more. As the years have passed, fans of the series have wondered if the game could ever come back online via fan-made solutions, such as private servers. Personally, I can't really get my hopes up. Keep in mind, I'm no programmer, so take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt, but in order to bring a game back online, you usually need to have analyzed the packets sent to and from the server while it was still active in order to figure out how the server was configured, then replicate that and make a fan server. As I understand it, it's not impossible if you weren't able to do so during the original server's life, but it becomes exponentially more difficult. Sakura Wars Online was extremely niche even in its time and home market, and I don't think the enthusiasm necessary to brute force a server solution is there at the moment within the greater hacking community. I'd love to be proven wrong, of course, and if the day comes where the game gets back online, maybe I'll even do a follow-up video, who knows. But for now, all we have left of the original online experience is a couple of minutes of video footage, a pile of low-resolution screenshots, and a smattering of archived web pages. Even with this limited information, though, I can tell that we lost something special. It was a way to get closer to the people behind the creation of the series, a way to experience the world of Sakura Wars in a brand new light, a way to make lasting friendships with like-minded fans. If the game ever does find a way back online, you can be sure that I'll be there, ready to take on all challengers at Koi Koi. Following the release of Sakura Wars Online on December 20th, 2001, the next game in the series to be released would be none other than Sakura Wars 4. However, before we talk about that, we'll need to make one more quick little detour, because we're going to the movies.